Hey, everybody. Welcome in. It's Just Dubs. John Dickinson, Greg Silver, live on the KNBR YouTube page, Twitch, Twitter/X stream. And we're doing what we do each and every Saturday morning here. It's called Just Dubs with John Dickinson. And we're going to be with you for the next couple of hours talking all things Golden State Warriors basketball. And last night was not pretty in the second half. There's no way around it, Greg. We might as well dive right into it. Ugly third quarter for the Warriors. They end up losing to the Pacers at home, 123-111. Kind of a back and forth first half. Warriors were pretty hot early. I know we talked a lot last night on Dubs OT about the fact that throughout the game, the Warriors got off to a pretty hot start, but the Pacers were just kind of playing their game, and they make you keep up with them. And as the game went on, I thought the Warriors did look physically tired, even though they brought the right energy at the beginning of the game, and just looked like a team that if they went cold for even a couple of minutes or started turning the ball over, the Pacers were going to end up creating some separation. And it's exactly what happened. And so it winds up not only being the loss last night, Greg, but it turns into another losing homestand, 1-2. And now 18-19 at home with just 4 games to go. And I know, the 8 seed is done. We made a big point of that last night. The Warriors are only 2 games up on the Rockets now for the final play-in spot. So ugly last night, bad homestand. As well as this team has played, they still aren't beating good teams. And it's really 9-10, or for the first time, I'm acknowledging 11. With as well as the Rockets have played in one head-to-head matchup still coming up between these two teams April the 4th in a little under 2 weeks in Houston. So a lot to chew on right off the top, and we got plenty of time to get into it all, but those are kind of the initial thoughts off of last night and just where it leads this team now for the final 3 weeks of the season.
Yeah, it was not the most exciting or inspiring week, but dare I say, I'm not surprised either. I didn't think the Knicks game was going to go very well. I hoped the Warriors would put together the kind of effort we saw in New York at Madison Square Garden. Didn't happen. Grizzlies, that was a nice win. I know the Grizzlies are undermanned, but that's the type of opponent that the Warriors have underachieved against all year. So to see that 22-0 run between halves and the 27-3 run, and the way they just broke open that game, and to see two-way Wiggins thrive, that was nice. I was not very confident heading into last night's game, to be completely honest. I thought the first half they had the offense. It was fun to see. We got a little shimmy from Klay and a smile. I'm glad that Klay Thompson's been playing much better basketball since he's been coming off the bench. But in the end, you need a lot of things to go right. And I think you said it best last night on Dubs OT. Indiana had another gear that the Warriors didn't, and the only way the Warriors were going to win that game is if they're the ones that got Indiana in a funk in the third quarter and got them into careless turnovers and got easy transition buckets, and they were able to control a double-digit lead that fluctuated a little bit throughout the game. Obviously, it happened in reverse. The Warriors are a 10th seed for a reason, and we could be looking at 11. Unfortunately, as much as I hate to say it, 8's not happening.
Well, and the reality is just the math, right? It's just look at the standings and where things are currently. And the Warriors with the 2 of 3 this week losing, they're now 36-33. The Lakers are 38-32. The Lakers got a home win against Philadelphia last night, 101-94. And so the Warriors now are a game and a half back of the Lakers, a game in the loss column. As we've discussed, they still play again April 9th, again down in Los Angeles. But the Warriors are basically going to have to win that game to have the tiebreaker over the Lakers. They would take 3 of 4 in the season series. So 8 versus 9 is still, I think, on the table at this point. But the Warriors are much closer to being out of the play-in tournament at this point than they are to 8. 8's currently Sacramento. Again, 8 is done. All right, the Warriors are 4 back of 8 without a tiebreaker. And so whether it's the Kings that end up 8 or Phoenix or even Dallas at this point, the Warriors would have to sweep Dallas over the 2 games that they're going to play coming up here in the first week of April. So it's done as far as, and they're farther back of Dallas as well than they are of Sacramento and even Phoenix, although I guess even in the loss column. Bottom line is this team's going to be 9, 10, or 11 when it's all said and done 3 weeks from tomorrow. And they're going to have to figure out a way to win a couple of road games, a couple of road elimination games in all likelihood. Maybe one at home. I mean, they could get to 9 and the first one's at home. But does that even benefit them at this point? I mean, they're about to go on a road trip, 5-gamer, 7 of the next 8 on the road. And it's gotten to the point where they're playing some pretty good teams. But I still just can't figure out why this team has been so bad at home. And even just this week, when you look at, the Knicks were a team, they went into Madison Square Garden and played a really good game against and beat. And the Pacers were a team that they went into Indiana the week of the Super Bowl leading up to it and put it on them. And I know those teams were more shorthanded in those games than they were in the games at Chase, but let up, not have an urgency. Again, I know we talked about this last night, and I agreed with you. I thought the Warriors did have urgency last night. I think it does come back to the fact that Indiana did have that gear. The Knicks defensively had a gear. The Warriors also allow these teams to just get so comfortable offensively early in games to where their confidence just runs high. And then when the Warriors need to get stops, they can't get stops. But I'm just looking at, all the teams that they've beaten or that they've lost to here. Boston, another gear. The Lakers even, another gear. Denver and the Clippers, I think both have another gear. So the teams that they've been beaten by, I think have something that they can call up in the big moments that the Warriors just can't and don't have. And it's an indicator that, for whatever reason, this team this season, I think there's a lot of reasons. We got, another hour and 50 minutes to get into it. They're just, it's been nice what they've done the last couple of months, but I think we have to start asking ourselves the question here, is how much of what they've done the last couple of months is sustainable toward next year, right? Because I think there's pieces of it there that are, but then there's other pieces, Greg, that are going to go away. And when those pieces go away, I think it's going to make it a lot more difficult for this team to be better than they were last year, to improve off of what they were last year. So they find themselves in a really, really difficult predicament, I think, as they look to try to finish strong and then find out how this thing ends up and then figure out how to get better next year.
Yeah, and I think that the philosophy of let's run it back clearly didn't work to the way that they planned on it. Like, let's just be honest about this team. We've talked about, Kuminga, and we will talk about him on the show. We've talked about Klay Thompson and everything. Steph Curry, maybe with the exception of 2016, has had stretches like this every single year where it's like, he's not playing bad basketball necessarily, but, he's fine, or his shot's a little off, or maybe he looks a little bit fatigued, because that's what happens in an 82-game season, even if he is the least human of all the players on this franchise. But now the spotlight's on him to score 35 and hit 8 threes a lot of nights. And let's be honest about this too. He's not getting a lot of free throws. That's just the reality of his statistics. So there's a lot of weight on him, and I think it's starting to catch up to him a little bit. And knowing Steph, he's going to find another surge. It's not like, he's declining and this is the end. But, this team cannot have it be where they need their best player to go out and be Superman every single night for them to even just stand a chance against teams that aren't bad, but teams that aren't necessarily championship teams.
Well, and I think you can also make the case that this year Steph he's done it in the sense that he's missed so few games, right? He's missed 6 games. And so, like, you can't count on that next year. either. Like I think you can count on a certain level of play, or at least I'm more confident in counting on a certain level of play when Steph is available. I think the one thing that you can't bank on, and that the Warriors have been fortunate that they haven't had to deal with this year, is more Steph Curry missed time. If Steph had missed anywhere close to the amount of games that he missed last year, or really any of the last 5-6 years, they'd already be done. And I think we'd be having a completely different conversation. So, part of that, and I've said this the last couple of years, part of your planning for next year and for the future years is got to be, how do you get through the times where Steph is out, and can you be good enough to be able to win enough to where when he does come back, you can continue to push forward and still be a low end playoff team or a play. And I think what we're finding is there's really not much of a way that the Warriors can do that with the current roster. And now we're talking about probably no Chris Paul next year. I mean, because that's the other part of it. I mean, Chris Paul has worked, I think, for his role when he's been limited to his role, but he's not coming. They're not bringing him back next year. Now, they may, whether they turn his slot into somebody else remains to be seen, but I don't see Chris Paul being a part of the Warriors, which means you don't have a backup point guard on your roster currently. And it can't be Podziemski if Podziemski's going to be the starting two. So that's the other, you can't be the starting two and the primary backup point guard.
Well, they can just bring back Corey Joseph. That'll get the fan base totally chill and relaxed. So
stop it.
But you're right. If you want to keep Podziemski in that starting two slot like he's been this year, then who is your backup point guard? And we talked about last night how Chris Paul, at least in our eyes collectively, has actually been pretty good for the Warriors. He's been very solid and delivered. So that's not even one of the glaring issues of this team. And he's going to be gone. It's more to think about. I do want to also just prompt the chat as we continue to welcome more people in the first 15 minutes of our Just Dubs every Saturday, 10 to noon. Ask us any questions. We'll do a little bit of a roundtable type of discussion because our chat's always really lively. If you have any questions that you want us to address, particularly the smarter man on the right side of the screen, please do so at any time. But yeah, it's messy. I still would think that they can get in the play in. I think that there's enough there. Like they're wildly inconsistent and will not get to the 8 and possibly not even the 9. But I also think that they show up just enough to where I don't see them completely falling off a cliff unless Steph Curry's missing time.
Yeah, I think they do end up getting in. Although last night, and we had somebody in the chat on Dubs OT who said, JD and Greg, I don't think the Warriors are going to win another game till they play Charlotte. Well, they play Charlotte a week from Friday. Coming up, a week from last night is when they play Charlotte, and so I mean that's 3 more losses. And the Rockets are playing Utah, and the Rockets are playing Portland at home. Their next couple of games, and the Rockets have been pretty good at home. So I mean, there is a world where the Warriors and the Rockets are tied on Tuesday night. When everything is said and done, if the Warriors lose these next 2, they'd be in a dead tie at 36 and 35. Now, the Warriors would still have the tiebreaker at this point, but it would be a scenario where that game on April 4th would be huge because it could have the potential to be a swing for the Warriors and the Rockets if, say, they come into that game being tied. But, this team has played better on the road. I am a little concerned at the fact, and I mentioned this last night as well, that this team does look a little tired and, not effort level tired, but just physically tired. And that was a concern coming in. It's why really for about a week and a half in the lead up to the stretch that started last Saturday, I mentioned it so many different times. The fact that the last 17 games for the Warriors were over a 30-day stretch where it was every other day, and the Warriors are still in this every other day from last Saturday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, tomorrow, Tuesday, or 3 back-to-backs also mixed in. Next week, Tuesday, Wednesday. The following week is going to be that the Rockets Dallas games, the couple of the Dallas games got switched around. And then they have another one the last week of the season in Portland, and then home against the Pelicans is the second half of that back-to-back. So they've got 3 back-to-backs to come. Been better on the road, but look tired. And I think, continuing to be on the road, going up against Miami, who grinds you, Minnesota, who grinds you, Orlando's a good young team.
Really good at home too.
Yeah, and really good at home too. So, I mean, the effort that the Warriors, I'm not saying they can't win, and they have played better on the road, but the effort that it's going to take to win any of the next 3 games is going to hurt you for the games that follow that. And the Warriors have no more breaks in the schedule. And so I do wonder, now you can't, we were getting this question a lot, like, hey, they're probably not getting the 8. Do they dial it back and rest guys here? Well, they can't afford to do that now because the Rockets are right on their heels. So they have no choice but to continue to push through in an attempt to stay in the play-in tournament, because if they can't make the play-in tournament, then, trade everybody at that point in time. I mean, it should be a completely new roster next year, but I have a feeling, there are still going to be, there's going to have to be a question that's had as to, is this team capable of contending for a championship next year? Like, they're going to have to look in the mirror and say to themselves, ask themselves the question, how can we be a championship contending team next year? Is it even possible? And I don't, I don't think they love the answers to that question. I do think there are a couple of ways, but I don't think they like the things that would have to happen, or think the things that would have to happen would. One of them I don't think they'd want to do, and the other one I don't think is likely to happen next year. Well,
let's get to a few of the chat questions, because we got some good contributions.
How can the Warriors get a big? How can the Warriors? Is that one of the chat questions? The Warriors need a big.
Not.
Thank God.
But it's a good question. Holy Lessons, who's out in Indy, says he warned everybody about the Pacers. Hello, Holy Lessons. Has Curry lost a step? To me, I'm going to say not necessarily. He's been pretty darn durable for being 35/36 this season. I think it's a natural ebb and flow of the season, kind of like I said a little bit earlier in the show. Like, with the exception of 2016 and maybe 2021, when he went on that insane stretch when you had the Kent Bazemore, Brad Wanamaker supporting cast, Curry's had some ups and downs all along. I don't know if he's necessarily lost a step. I just think that he is asked to do so much, so much, that I wouldn't say he's like slowing down in any way, at least not yet. What are your thoughts on that?
I think he's lost a step. I think it's really small, but I think he has. I don't think there's much question. I think he's still capable of being elite, and is an all-star, and is a carrier. But I do think there is, it's small, it's almost unnoticeable, but I do think it's there. I think it's there more in his finishing around the basket, I think, than it is as it relates to the 3-point shot. I think there are times where he, last year, and really the last couple of years, even the championship year, he would drive, and it was floaters, and it was layups, and teams would run him off the line, and he'd really make him pay. I mean, think Sacramento. I happened to see some highlights of the Game 7, and the 50 piece in Sacramento, and he just annihilated the Kings on drives. I mean, it was really drives and pull-ups and floaters. And yeah, he had the 3-ball mixed in there in some key moments, and hit some crazy ones. But that's really how he beat that. And I think that's how he beat Boston in the finals in 2022 when things got tough. So, yes, again, is it noticeable to the point where it's like he can't still carry the team at the level that he has? I would say no. Is it noticeable to the point to where, if you've been watching him for his entire career, it's just a tick off? Like, if Curry's a 93, then he's probably like a 91.5 or something like that. It's like, it's not, it doesn't change the level that he's at. But yeah, I think every day there's a little small number that comes off the total package with age.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I guess maybe to say literally not lost a step is false, but I guess I was going from the perspective of not to a degree that like that's really a glaring issue. Another one of our regulars.
It's at the bottom of their. It's at the bottom of their issues. That I wholeheartedly agree with. That, like, you can count on Steph for planning purposes. You never know, but you can count on Steph for your planning purposes for next year to be the player that he's been the last 2 years. Like, I'm more than comfortable saying that. Like, you don't have to plan for a Steph decline next year. Now, at some point, it's going to sneak up on everybody and happen. And, that's not going to be pretty considering, who the Warriors have around him. But I think you can safely bet that that's not going to be next year. It is a year-to-year proposition, though, at this point.
Yeah, that's fair. Another one of our regulars, Judith Pierre. What's up, Judith? Says, do you think Podziemski should split with Moses Moody? I'll go first. No. And
that was all. Yeah. Short answer. No.
Yeah. I do like Moses Moody. I think he's done a really good job handling adversity. I think he puts his head down and works. But you're kind of seeing with really the last month. Yeah, he was nice when he started in those few games when Wiggins was out. His shooting splits have not been good. And if he's not hitting outside threes, it's really hard to justify it. Like, I know Podziemski is also struggling to score. Podziemski has been much more effective in winning lineups than a Moses Moody. And that's even when Moody's been able to hit some shots. So I'm not saying Moody should not get playing time. He should not be split with Podziemski. Like, JD, is it just me, or has Podziemski kind of been like the rising darling of the Warriors and then quickly became a little bit of a villain?
Yeah, villain might not be the right word, but I'm starting to look like a villain with the sun peeking into the. It's been a rainy morning, obviously in the Bay, and so I've got this like window blocker thing that I'll put in for when we do these shows to try to keep the light out. And because it was so dark and dank and cloudy, I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to put the shade in the window to block it out. And then of course we start doing the show, and then the sun starts peeking in through everything, and now I'm starting to look like some kind of a villain with all these different light effects coming in on my forehead. Somebody's got the laser scope on me or something right now. But no, as far as Moody goes, the reality is no, he shouldn't be splitting time. And as far as him becoming a villain, I agree with you. He has become one of the players that's blamed. Right. We always have
more of a scapegoat is a better word.
We have the Warrior blame game, right? It's never Steph's fault. It was never Klay's fault really until this year. Like, people got really frustrated with Klay, I thought, in a big way this year for the first time. It's always Wiggins' fault. It's always they don't have a big, right? It's always it's never Steph's fault, ever. Never Steph's fault. It's never Kuminga's fault. Kuminga's Teflon. Like, Kuminga can do no wrong. Like, did anybody actually say Kuminga had a bad game last night? I didn't. Did anybody write?
People acknowledge.
Did anybody write that? Did anybody write that Kuminga had a bad game last night? I just nothing in the bigger picture, but it's like we can acknowledge. So yeah, no, Podziemski. There's this notion that like more Moody and less Podziemski helps the Warriors, because when the Warriors lose, Podziemski typically doesn't score a lot, at least of late. But no, you said it. He's a part of their winning lineups, and he's been a positive player for them this year. I think I'm trying to think. Maybe you sent this to me. Aren't Kuminga and Podziemski their top 2 plus-minus players? I think Kuminga and Steph might not be because of so many minutes with groups that didn't work earlier in the year. But Podziemski, even though he doesn't score, is a player that does enough other things, passing, rebounding, which they need in that starting lineup. And so No, he is a more dynamic player. And so, yeah, I think Moody, he's your 10th
I actually have
man.
an update for you
He's
on
your
the
10th
plus
man.
minus.
Okay.
So Kuminga is now a very close number 3. He's at plus 109. Draymond is plus 114.
Okay. So it's so it's Draymond, Pajemski.
No, Pajemski's at the top by far.
Oh, it's Pajemski, Draymond, Kuminga. Okay.
Yes, and Draymond and Kuminga are like right there.
Gotcha. Okay. So there you go. So that's kind of important. I mean, and a lot of that is Kuminga playing with Draymond, and a lot of that is Kuminga and Draymond playing with Steph as well. I like Moody too, but let's be honest. Like, Moody's just a guy. Like, he's just a guy. Like, he's a bench player. Moody's a bench player that some nights when guys are out can play 25 and play well. And some nights it's going to be a couple of 5-minute shifts in each half. And then you move on. And, again, I don't like to belabor it, but he was, I think, the worst player on the court last night for the Warriors. I mean, I couldn't believe the 3 balls that he took. And, plus minus would say there were worse players on the court last night, by the way. But, Kuminga was not good last night. Wiggins was not good last night.
Yeah, but by the way, as you said on the show, like, we're not going to harp on Kuminga having a bad game when he's had, 5 bad games in the last 30?
No doubt.
Moody, it's a little bit more of an even ratio.
Well, they're trying to find minutes for Moody, and since it's tough because some guys just play better when somebody's out and they get an opportunity. And I feel like Moody has been at his best when he's not getting run. Everybody's pissed off that he's not getting run. And then Kerr just kind of goes to him when you don't expect anything from him. And then he plays really well for a couple of games. And then Steve Kerr will say he's going to be in the rotation regularly. And I don't even totally think Kerr means it, but he's trying to say the right things, but he's looking at his rotation sheet and he's like, how am I going to get 5 minutes for him? I really can't. Maybe a few here in each half. And the reality is, and we saw this with Kuminga, like last year and 2 years ago, but really last year, Kuminga, when he played 25, was productive and guys were out, was productive. Kuminga, when everybody was healthy and he got knocked down a couple of pegs in the rotation and it was going to be, you're going to play 15 minutes. He didn't play well in that. And, I think Moody doesn't play well in that, to the point where if you can't play well in that role and we don't have another role for you because other players are ahead of you, then it almost becomes better for you to not play at all. And I think that's where Steve Kerr has found himself with Moses Moody. I just don't think Moses Moody can be planned on, even for next year, to be more than like the 9th or the 10th man. Like, he's not the starting 3, it's just, he's just a guy at this point.
Quick trivia question while we were on the topic of plus minus. Which Golden State Warrior has a plus minus of 0 this year?
Andrew Wiggins? No, he's got to be a negative. Chris Paul? No, he's got to be a positive.
No. Chris Paul's he's plus 60. It's a little bit of a cheap answer because the answer is Pat Spencer.
Oh, well, that's a worthless question. Here, I'm thinking of relevance, and you're giving me Pat Spencer.
Quinones is at plus 12. He's the lowest of the plus.
Yeah, I haven't looked at that in a while, but yeah, that's off the top. Where is Curry, by the way?
He's 4th. He is plus 89 behind Kuminga.
Okay, so it's Pajemski, Draymond, Kuminga, Steph, and then Chris Paul. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Thank
you, Andis Brown.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, we do appreciate everybody in the YouTube chat as people file in. Rockin' New Era 84, our buddy CA, Andis Brown, Erwin Kwong. Sorry I couldn't make it to Harmonic after the game. Rain was pouring, and I was the DD for last night. Totally understood, and it was packed last night at Harmonic. A lot of people looking to stay out of the rain, I think, because it was coming down pretty good right as the game went final last night, and people were exiting Chase Center. And so, yeah, it was like, all right, let's dive in there. I think, the St. Mary's game was on as the Warriors game was ending, and we were all trying to see if they could make a run against Grand Canyon. Not last night, not their night. And so, yeah, people were pretty fired up and just kind of checking out everything that was going on there. So we love seeing that. Love the folks at Harmonic Brewing, and we'll be back out there on April 2nd when the Warriors are going up against the Dallas Mavs, and that might be a game.
Rescheduled home game.
Right. That game is a road game on the original schedule, but that was a game that got flip-flopped because of the passing of Coach Decky. And so that's now a home game, and then they're making up the road game on the 5th that week when they go play on the road for 5 and then come home for 1 and then go back to Houston and Dallas for a back-to-back on Thursday the 4th, and a big game front end of that back-to-back now with the Houston game and then the Dallas game beyond that as well. So tough stuff for the Warriors last night. What to make of this team moving forward? How do they get better? I mean, all of these things are things that they're going to have to figure out. And I know I'm always a big proponent of how seasons end really matters. And, I think there's a case to be made. And one of the things I was asking you as we were kind of planning out how we wanted to do the show, like, is this team better or worse than they were last year? And it's crazy because the stretch that they've had since the end of January is the best stretch that they've had in either of the last 2 years, the most extended positive stretch. That being said, they're not in all likelihood going to get to the record they had last year. They could. I mean, they could. But to do that, what are they right now? 36 and 33. So they got to go 8-5 in the last 13. They could go 8-5 in the last 13, but not a lock. And they're definitely going to be a worse seed, obviously, than they were last year. I mean, last year, so the Western Conference is better. If the Warriors are better, and again, you got to get to 44 to even have a conversation about it. But if the Warriors are better, the Western Conference is better. They've been dropped down. But what do you think? And let's kind of get into what's sustainable about this season and what's not, because I think we can all agree they're not a championship team this year. They thought they could be. I remember Steve Kerr in LA, first thing out of his mouth before everybody said, hey, we're running it back. Going back to when they went out last year was, hey, this was not a championship team this year, meaning last year. I think we can safely say this is not a championship team this year. Meaning this year, we're not going to have to wait till May 12th, and the Warriors are not going to play till May 12th anyway, in all likelihood. So I'm comfortable saying they're not a championship team on March 23rd of this year. So that being said, what's the pathway to getting back to that point? And how much of and we can save that question because I've mentioned this to you. I mentioned it when I was filling in for Tolbert and Copes with Dieter Kurtenbach. I think there's two ways, and they're both centered around Jonathan Kuminga, that the Warriors can be a contender next year. But let's save that part of the conversation, and I'll reiterate for those that hadn't heard it coming up here. But what is sustainable and what's not among the things that we've seen, let's say, over the last 2 months in your estimation?
Oof. Sustainable, weirdly
for next
enough.
Year. Yeah, next year.
Now, this is going to depend on what kind of contract can be agreed upon. I texted you this about 9:15, which is a couple of months ago. You would have said Klay Thompson's probably not going to be on the team next year if they want to be serious about it. Now he actually is thriving really well in this bench role, and if you can keep him on the team without taking an insane amount of money to keep that role, I think that's not a bad thing. But then you kind of came back with, does that make them better? Kind of depends on some other teams. I think one other thing I'll say before I let you keep going with it is the Andrew Wiggins thing is really tough because we've been very pro Wiggins and supporting his personal life and all that. But as far as difficult and honest conversations the Warriors have to have, they need to have the Andrew Wiggins conversation too. Like, is he consistent and reliable enough to be someone that can help the team? Because that's the element that they've lost. Not only is he the true small forward, like we always say, the only true three on the team, they need a wing defender that ideally can shoot well enough in today's modern NBA too. And the shooting has not been there. The defense and effectiveness and aggressiveness has been really up and down. And when he's playing well, like we saw on Wednesday, you're like, yes, the Warriors with this version of Wiggins, that's the best case scenario. But he disappears all too much to where it's like, well, I don't know. Like, why is the 29-year-old the liability on the team when you're trying to hold on to people in their late 30s?
Yeah, I think the Wiggins conversation is a critical conversation. And you're right. As much as we've supported him in the personal issues and trying to deal with it, the Warriors do have to look in the mirror and ask themselves, and it is tricky. And the reason to me that it's tricky is because it's not simple addition by subtraction. I think a lot of Warrior fans think, well, just get rid of him. And, Andis, do you think Wiggs will be back next season? If they lose him for all his issues, he's an athletic wing who can guard the opposition's best wing, another hole to fill. Bingo.
And not just
Bingo.
wing. He locked down Kobe.
Guards,
yeah.
Point guards, because they don't have that guy anymore because it's not Klay and it's not Steph. And it can be Kuminga, but if it's Kuminga, then you don't have anybody for the wing players, right? So that if Kuminga is going to start, and here's the other thing, if Kuminga is going to start chasing all the little guards around and hounding him defensively, that's going to hurt his offensive game. Like that, there's no question. As he tries to grow his offensive game and add the ability to shoot, like if you're getting your ass worn down by defending, he'll still be able to get to the bucket maybe and dunk on cuts and things that are open within the flow of the Warrior offense. But putting your head down and driving when you've got somebody really trying to hound you and defend you becomes a lot harder. Hitting that pull-up jumper becomes a lot harder. So I'm not sure you want to put that on Kuminga in a full-time role either, as far as having to be the primary defender when you're already going to be the number 2 scorer, at least as things are currently broken down. But to go back to Wiggins, they have to have an honest conversation as to, and I think they are going to look to trade him. I do think the Warriors, I think the Warriors are going to look long and hard at trading Andrew Wiggins. And, they're going to have to take back somebody in all likelihood that's got a similar contract, another team's problem, another team's Wiggins, right? But I don't know, when you look around the league, especially the way the last couple of years have gone, I don't know who in the league is going to look at Wiggins as salvageable at this point. Like, what other team would look at Wiggins because there weren't teams that believed it when the Warriors got him 4 years ago. And the Warriors bet on the fact that with everything else that they had around him, his skill set could play and he could be an effective player if they maybe got his motor up more consistent or whatever. I know they really, when he initially got here, they focused on the shots that he had been successful with throughout his career. They really tried to get him the ball in those spots, more corner threes, getting him the ball in certain positions on the wing and letting him drive with they'd get him the ball on the left wing and try to let him drive to the right from the left wing, which was something. So they really were focused, I think, analytically on trying to put him in the best positions to have the most success, knowing that he had the athleticism to be a really good defender and be a two-way player and all of that. But what I'm getting at, Greg, is, the Warriors made that bet, but at a time where nobody in the league thought they could get that out of him, at a time where the whole league thought Andrew Wiggins was just the guy that he had been in Minnesota, the Warriors get that out of him for a couple of years. Now it looks as if he's reverted back, and he's not hungry to win a title anymore because he's already won a title. So, like, if you're the rest of the league, I don't think you view Andrew Wiggins as a $30, $28, $26 million player here over the course of these next few years. And so unless you're giving up an albatross yourself in terms of a contract, you're probably not taking him back. So the Warriors in some ways may be stuck with him. The one they cannot afford to just trade him into somebody's cap space and attach something else to him. Like, they're not, you can't start sending future first round picks out just to get rid of Andrew Wiggins. So the reality is, I think they're going to search, but it is a tricky conversation because for all of his problems, as Andis said, you take him away and you don't replace him and you're worse for it. And a big part of the reason that Kuminga's success has been meaningful has been because it's been with Wiggins and with Draymond on a front line that you can actually win with. So even even the conversation surrounding him, as much as there's a lot of people out there that are like, yeah, get rid of him, he ain't addition by subtraction. He's not. And the Warriors could trade him and be worse for it. Point blank.
Yeah, but they also could keep him and get the same level of inconsistency, which is understandably frustrating for the fans. But I agree with you that they could totally trade him and be worse for it. And I saw online something about this week. I think the Warriors should try to trade Wiggins, maybe Moody in there, and Looney, and see what they can get. And I'm thinking
Paul George.
Yeah, and I'm like, dude, I love Looney. Like, we had a whole segment about how much I love Looney. That package, what does that get you? Like, let's be honest.
Paul George, right? Kawhi,
Giannis,
Towns, Wiggins back to Minnesota. I'm kidding.
Yeah,
obviously, I'm kidding. I'm joking.
Yeah, I'll just clip that. I'm gonna clip that out of context and be like, look what JD says on KNBR. CA asking if Mikal Bridges is a realistic target for them in the offseason. I mean, the Nets are a mess, but again, is it?
I mean, can you get him without trading Kuminga? I mean, that's the first thing that, and the short answer is, I think Kuminga has played his way to a point where you only are trading him for a star, and Mikal Bridges is not a star. So did he make the All-Star team this year, Mikal Bridges? No. Yeah. So he's not even an All-Star, which, at this point, Kuminga isn't either, but I think the belief is Kuminga is going to continue to get better and eventually, maybe be an all-star. I think that's the question. Like, you can't get Bridges for Wiggins, right? And Mikal Bridges is making 23.3 next year and 24.9 the following year. That's the issue is, like, would you trade? I don't know. Like, am I missing something? Like, I don't think the Nets don't want Chris Paul's contract that they can make go away. Like, it's not like the Nets want off of Mikal Bridges to the point where, they're going to trade him and basically take nothing back. Like, you'd have to give up a couple of first round picks. You'd have to, like, again, Kuminga. Like, if they're trading Mikal Bridges, what is Brooklyn? What would Brooklyn want off the Warriors roster? Like, to me, and here's the reality. And again, it's a harsh reality, but we're living in. Kuminga's really their only tradable asset. Like that you could get anything of significance for. Like any team right now in the league that's looking at the Warriors, who do they want? They don't want Moody. They don't want, like, Podziemski's Podziemski's a role player. Like Trace Jackson Davis, like, you're not getting a star for any of those guys. Package them. Like, Kuminga is the dude. Wiggins, no. Clay's going to be a free agent. You're not trading Steph. Draymond's not going anywhere. Like, there's nobody on the Warriors roster that can net them what Kuminga can. And so when we talk about, again, if you disagree, let me know, Greg. But I mean, we start talking about even Mikal Bridges level players, and I don't think the Warriors want to make that. I think they want to, if you're going to trade Kuminga, you want a better player than Mikal Bridges. And I love Mikal Bridges. We talked a couple months ago about, like, in January before Kuminga came on, I would have considered that. I would have considered Siakam, as we talked about. But now I think if you're the Warriors, you believe you can get a better player. And you know what? 2 months ago, you couldn't. Now you might be able to, or at least he's played well enough to where you're not going to trade him for Mikal Bridges or Pascal Siakam. Although, and again, this is irrelevant to the point of guys getting traded for each other, but how good was Pascal Siakam on Kuminga last night? Woo! Pascal Siakam.
25 and 16 total in the game.
Pascal Siakam annihilated Kuminga, defending him on the perimeter and not letting him get to his spot. And then whenever he did get to a spot, you had Miles Turner basically waiting to turn him away. That was something. What the Pacers were able to do. I had my Mikal Bridges line up, his contract up, and accidentally deleted it. So that's why I deleted the tab, Greg. So I was looking at the contract, trying to get to his stats. But I mean, yeah, is there, like, how do you get a guy like Mikal Bridges?
I mean, with the draft picks they have and the assets that they have not named Jonathan Kuminga,
no chance.
You don't. Yeah.
You don't. And that gets to the question, and it's the Kuminga conversation, and it goes to, how does this team become a championship contender next year? How do they become a championship contender next year? And I think there's two ways. Kuminga becomes a superstar, an all-star that's basically a superstar by the end of the year, or the beginning of the following year. Like, he's going to be that kind of player. Or you have to trade him for a dude who's already that. And that guy becomes the second headliner next to Steph, and then you figure out the rest of the way to build out the roster. It's Kuminga and the Chris Paul contract and maybe a pick for a dude, for a Towns, for a Paul George, for and again, I'm just throwing out level of player.
Right. Exactly.
And I know there are a lot of Warrior fans probably wouldn't want to do it for Towns, to be honest, given the baggage that he's had, and competitiveness issues and all of those things. So again, I don't think the Warriors want to do that, but they have to ask themselves then, and maybe have to look in the mirror and acknowledge the fact that they're just not going to be title contenders next year. Like, if you want to continue Kuminga's development for another year, maybe he's not an all-star next year, but he could be the following year. Do you want to just continue with that? I almost think the Warriors have to ask themselves the question with Kuminga: do you believe that he is a future one? Like, do you believe he's a future superstar, best player on a team that can, be winning multiple playoff rounds? And if you think that that's who he can be, then okay, hang on to him and continue to develop him. And in a couple of years, maybe you're to that point, but you also have to acknowledge the fact that you're not going to be able to improve enough next year, even with Steph still in that late prime, to be a title contender. Like, that's just the reality. They may just be hey, we're developing Kuminga and Steph's here and Draymond and you know what? We're probably going to be a play-in team next year. Maybe we'll get to the 6 if all things go right. Like I hate to say it, but I feel like that's becoming more what the reality would be for this team. As they start to project, when you start talking about taking away, because that's the thing. Klay coming back, to go back to that point, Klay coming back in a bench role for a reasonable price, that I do think can work, but it doesn't make you better. It makes you the same. You're going to have to replace Chris Paul, who's been a productive player. He's been the number 5 plus minus player for the Warriors this year. So does not having him make you better next year? Nope. Wiggins, if you trade Wiggins and you don't get a productive player back for Wiggins, you have to get a player who's more productive than Wiggins. We can argue about what the bar is for that, but you got to if you don't do that, you're not better. And, in a lot of ways, and that's even with Kuminga gets a little better and maybe TJD gets a little better, Podziemski gets a little better. Like, I think it's fair to expect a rise in those 3 players. But again, the only way they're title contenders is if Kuminga next year becomes a bona fide all-star that's like right at the brink of superstardom. That's the only freaking way.
And I wanted to bring up a comment here from Benjamin that he just said, because it relates to what my thought was and where I was going to go with this, which is people have been very reluctant to the idea of trading Kuminga because they're like, well, then you don't care about the future and you're nuking the future. I want to be very clear. You're absolutely saying screw it to the future and any kind of rebuilding and anything. Like, if you trade Jonathan Kuminga for a guy that's more proven, a little older, and probably better right now, yeah, you're absolutely making the future your problem. But that's a problem for when Steph and Draymond and maybe Steve Kerr and Klay are no longer there. So
2026 isn't that far away. 2026 isn't that far away. Like that's the only, yeah. So yeah,
it's not that, you trade Kuminga because they're trying to, it's going to be better for the long term. No, I think it's kind of hard to argue that it would be better for the long term at all. It's pretty clearly worse. It's strictly for do you really want to try to get a 5th title before the end of Stephen Curry's career? Like, that is the question. You got to weigh it out on the scale. What are your priorities, Joe Lacob? And Kuminga is the only tradable asset. I don't want to see him shipped off because I think he has been awesome, but it's the only player you can use as a piece to get you something that could possibly have you in contention. That's all we're saying with Kuminga. I think he's been awesome this season. I know last night was one of a pretty rough game for him, but for the most part, in fact, the other night, we were saying, as far as like what the biggest X factor is for the Warriors, we didn't say Jonathan Kuminga being the number 2 scorer because of how consistent he has been offensively for the last 3 months, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think last night was just an outlier. Like, I think, okay, great. Play better the next game. But I do think, I do wonder if the Warriors really go all in on him being the number 2 next year, because they kind of fell into that this year, right? Like, it wasn't the plan for him to be the number 2, but because Klay Thompson and Wiggins are so bad early, and even in the middle of the season were so bad that it, became a point in which the Warriors could, they really didn't have a choice, right? Kuminga was willing and he ran with it. And so, he's become the number 2 option. I think his teams know that for next year, the way he gets defended is going to be different, and he's going to have to adjust to that. I think in some ways, but I think he'll be capable. I think that's where going through a game like last night actually really helps Kuminga, because that's where I think playing in a playoff series would help Kuminga, right? To be able to go through that and come back. And this year it's not like, this year is not last year, right? Like last year it was, they had better options. If he had played against the Kings, they probably lose the series. This year, you don't have to worry about that. Like this year, just run him out there. You play Denver, whoever you get, he's your second best offensive player right now. You just run him out there and you let the chips fall where they may. And if you get beat, you get beat. And he gets to learn from it. They were not in that spot last year to just roll with it. That's a revisionist history that I'm not going to go back through. But they have to have the Kuminga conversation internally. And I get it. If you don't want to trade him, or there's like 5 players in the league you'd trade him for, and none of those guys are available, then hang on to him. But you're probably going to be too far from a title next year to make that a reality. And you may be too far in the next 2 years while Steph's still at the peak of his powers, minus maybe a little small step. So it's an acknowledgement that only the Warriors internally can decide whether they want to accept or not. And I think it also comes down to, we've said the Wiggins conversation. We've discussed the Kuminga conversation. There's also a Steph conversation. Like the Warriors have to go to Steph and ask him if he's cool with want to develop Kuminga and not be a title contender next year or not. Like, are you okay with that? Because, they doubled down on the vets last year and it didn't work. Like it didn't like that. And I can understand why they did it, but it didn't work. Wiggins and Clay were worse than they were last year. And it set the course of everything back, until they figured out this recent combination, which has been better. And whatever it is, the 17 wins, I've kind of lost count, but the 17 wins since January 30th, I still think are the third most in the league over that span. But I think the Warriors would be foolish. One, because you can't expect everybody back in their roles that they've played during this stretch. But I think the Warriors would be foolish to look at that and say, hey, we're going to trust the last 2.5 months of the season as to this is the team we're going to be next year, right? Like whatever the record is now, I think it's 17-6 maybe now. I could be off by a game. I think 17-6 or 7. In the games where Curry's finished, it's actually worse than that if you add in the losing streak. So again, it's gotten all muddled over the last couple of weeks here as the Warriors have sort of locked themselves into being a 9, 10, 11. But they got to have a conversation with Steph, bottom line.
They absolutely do. They absolutely have to. We compared like Dirk Nowitzki in the end of his career and what the Mavericks were. There's not a ton of good comparisons to go off of. I mean, even Kobe Bryant, Lakers weren't competitive for the final few years of his career. Like, it could just be a reality. I know the chat has kind of varying opinions on it. I feel like I had a point, and I will probably remember it because we'll take a little intermission coming up here.
Sure.
I do want to, just for fun, because the chat is always fun. Erwin, it's always the tough love, and I just want to say you're absolutely right. I was rolling with like the messy, I work night shift radio hair for a good month. I decided to clean it up for a good week. And you're right. I absolutely am looking a little too corporate, and I'll acknowledge it. CA also piling on with the agreement. Hey, listen, you guys are smarter than I am. Totally agree.
Yeah, I totally. Yeah, you're cleaned up, man. Like I respect it. I didn't have the energy for that this morning. I was like throw on the sweatshirt guy. I didn't even do a little touch up. Sometimes I'll do a little touch up to I'll do my own little haircut, my own little version of a haircut at this point. But I was like, you know what? I don't even have the energy for the razor this morning. I don't have it.
I'm just trying to manifest just a little bit of positive vibes, clean it up a little bit. Warriors are the 10th. 10th is fine. That's postseason in today's NBA, That's the energy we're going for.
It's postseason. I mean, this is the other thing too. And they won a championship. less than 2 years ago. The Warriors won a championship less than 2 years ago. But I've heard people kind of look at it this way. I mean, the Warriors could go back to 2020, right? Disaster, miss the playoffs. Like, they could miss the playoffs 3 out of 5 years. 3 of the last 5 years when you go back through it. Now, they won a title in there and made it to the second round, which is still pretty good. But I mean, they haven't in some of these other. It's not like in some of these other years they've been going to the conference finals and losing, or going to the second round and losing. They've been kind of cobbled together. I mean, understandably so. I mean, the COVID year that was cut short. Obvious reasons, basically no Steph or Clay. So, of course, you're going to be the worst team in the league. And then, you end up without Clay, losing in the play-in. That team, ironically, was what? The 8 going into the play-in, and then ended up out. So this team's not even going to be that level. Last year they were a 6, but they were a 6 in a world where the same record this year is probably a 10. And so, I don't know. It's been kind of cobbled together. I think with the emergence of some of the young players, there's some hope that maybe it's a little bit more stable, but you still have to find the right complement of veterans around the young players to even be what you've been this year moving forward to next year. And I think that, Greg, is where that's where it gets a little dicier for the Warriors.
Yep. We've had a lot of the same phrases repeated over the past few months. And I guess the one that I'll recycle is that they don't have the luxury of avoiding the hard conversations. Like, plain and simple, you got to have a lot of them. You got to just put everything on the table. And it seems like it's probably going to happen in mid to late April. I'd be surprised if it happens a little bit later, just in terms of how long the Warriors season goes. But yeah, I mean, that is the reality. Here, why don't we take a short break, a short intermission here on Just Dubs. And James M, I've actually refused to get him any Christmas presents until
nephew, right?
Steph Curry starts getting a better whistle. So there we go.
Yeah, Greg is Adam's nephew, actually.
Good old Uncle Adam.
I made that up, by the way. But anyway.
Yeah, he couldn't even get me a job in the league, man. Like, it's messed up.
All right. Quick little break, 2 or 3 minutes. We'll grab some coffee. I'm going to decide whether I'm going to put the sunshade in the window here. I'm probably not. I'm probably not. And then more in the YouTube chat as well. Really appreciate everybody chiming in. We got a lot of people that want to talk, and we'll keep asking your questions, keep answering your questions, keep them coming. We appreciate that. Where does bringing Clay back help you for next year? What's the Wiggins conversation? Do you think Wiggins is addition by subtraction at this point? And then Kuminga is the big one. Are you cool continuing Kuminga's development for next year and the next couple of years if it means that you're not going to be contending for titles over the next couple of years? Because I do think that's what's on the table. It's Just Dubs, JD, Greg Silver. We're back in about 2-3 minutes here. KNBR, the sports leader. Hey, we're back. That was a little longer than 2 or 3 minutes. I apologize. I had a little coffee incident. I had a little coffee incident in the other room.
Who are you,
There may,
Murph?
there may have been there may have been some spillage in the other room, and then a rebrew, and then I gotta find something to clean this up. So we're back. We're good. The coffee's ready to go. I decided to make it an iced coffee. So yeah, cheers. I feel like I'm always cheersing somebody. Cheer! Look at you with your fills today. Look at us. We're like corporate. Look at we've got our corporate coffee cup.
Dude, it's bad. Erwin was right. It's bad.
So yeah, we've got dueling coffee rivalries here, but I do like Phil's.
I mean, I took the walk to Phil's just to wake me up, and then the coffee's to keep me awake. So that was kind of the philosophy here.
No, absolutely, and I've got a walkable Phil's as well. And yeah, there's one out here in the creek. But I didn't have that energy this morning either. Erwin Kwong, cheers to JD and Greg. We're back here. We'll keep this thing rolling until noon. We appreciate everybody, YouTube and Twitch and the Twitter X stream, as we're well into hour number 2 here today for KNBR, the sports leader, on YouTube and on Twitch. And we're going to be back on the radio, I believe, next week as well. I know there's been some giant spring training conflicts. And, this show, Just Dubs, is kind of living in many different forms. It's a YouTube live stream podcast. We're going to break this thing out in the off season, emergency pods. When things happen, we'll have the ability to go live and just talk to the people. So a big part of what we're building in terms of our Warriors coverage here at KNBR, and I appreciate everybody who's in on the ground level of it right now, because we're not going anywhere as far as this goes. And yeah, when there aren't Giants conflicts, we are going to be on KNBR over the air as well. And Douglas Mikes, I agree. Greg looks like he's ready to go to Cancun, just like the Warriors. I agree with that. That's a great call. That might be the comment of the day.
Douglas Mike's usually pretty good comments. I'd say it's an A- at worst usually for him.
Yeah, no, I no doubt. So yeah, we're the big theme of the day. How do you explain the home thing? Like, how do you explain? I mean, 18 and 19 at home. I know we tried to do it last night on Dubs OT. They are horrible at home. Like, I mean, that is, I think, the 12th best record in the Western Conference at home. It just doesn't make any sense.
So only below them is Portland, San Antonio, and who's the other one I'm missing?
Portland, San Antonio, and I've lost my spot here. I've got it. And Memphis.
Oh, duh. Yeah.
Memphis is the worst at 8-27 in the West. The Spurs are 8-26. Portland is 11-26. And then the Warriors are 18-19. They're one of 4 teams that are under 500 at home in the Western Conference. There are a couple teams in the East. I guess Atlanta is the only one in the East among the 10. But yeah, that's not great. It's a bottom 11-12 home record in the NBA, which is just unheard of for the Warriors. Even in years where they've been kind of mid, like last year, they went 33-8. Even in the COVID year where they didn't have fans for half the year in 2021, they had a pretty good home record by comparison. So I don't know how to make sense of that. It's funny, they made such a big deal about the road record, and they've been really good on the road this season. I'm looking at, I mean, they're basically top 6, top 7 in the Western Conference in terms of road record, but way down at the bottom at home. And they're going to really lament that. I mean, that's the close game losses and the home defeats and not protecting the home court, I think are going to be big topics whenever they do wind up going out.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll try to explain what I talked about this week, both on Dubs OT and when I did a segment with Kerry Crowley. kind of in the best I can, and just going to repeat my thoughts a little bit because I know everyone tunes in and out at different times. And I mean, I told Kerry Crowley on Sports Phone, actually before the Indiana game, he talked about the Warriors' home record thing, and he said, do teams really fear them? And I said it was kind of the worst of both worlds in that teams don't fear them because they don't defend the perimeter very well. They've struggled to hold on to leads. They clearly don't have the same gear, being able to just kick it into an extra level that they used to when they were kicking teams' butt. And on top of that, they are still the Warriors. They still have that logo on the front of the jersey. You still have Steph Curry. You have people that are not that far removed from being champions. So you're going to be fired up to go play them. So you're getting their best effort. And I don't know, with the home thing, super bizarre. The way I phrased it last night is that opponents don't fear them. So it enables them to go and kind of punch the Warriors in the mouth. And when the Warriors come out a little bit too relaxed, especially the younger players that haven't really proved much in the league so far, well, I think that enables you to get punched in the mouth hard to a point where you're just trying to crawl out of a hole all game. They're not good enough to just go on a 20-2 run like every single night like they used to be and just blitz you. So I think they just are getting a little too relaxed. And once they crank it into a little bit more urgency and better focus, at that point, it's too late. It's hard to come up with a 15-point advantage in limited time.
It is. And I think you nailed it. I mean, I think some nights it's a lack of urgency. I think when you do blow leads, teams kind of know that they're always one run away from putting a little pressure on you. And so I think, opposing coaches can tell teams, especially really good teams, hey, we stay close, stay with it. We'll get them. I think, Denver's done that. Obviously, the Clippers did that. Phoenix did that, even though the Warriors ended up winning the game. Remember, the Warriors did have a lead in the game where Steph hit the three the night before the Super Bowl. The Warriors had, I think, a 6 to 8 point lead, and then it was like, 11-2 run, down by 2, and then Steph ended up saving them on that night. But Phoenix was able to walk them down in the final couple of minutes of that one. So I do think it's that, and I think the other part of it is the fact that you still there is a little PTSD from the dominance that the Warriors put on so many teams for a long time, and you still see Warriors, right? And you want to beat the team that's been the most dominant in the league over the last decade, and it's still Steph, and it's still Draymond, and it's still Clay, and I think
the faces, by the way, of one of the best teams of all time. Like, that's right. Not going away.
So you want to beat them. Like, you really want to beat them. And so I do think the Warriors still get the max effort kind of against everybody. And the Warriors just can't match it, number one. But the Warriors are also not as good. And so it's like they can't match it night in, night out. They're not as good. So you're getting other teams going full blast against them, and then the Warriors aren't quite as good, which leads to some pretty ugly runs. I thought last night in the third quarter was as bad as they played at any point this season with the turnovers.
How do you match that up with the final 6 minutes of the Denver game on January 5th? Fourth.
I thought last night was worse. I thought last night was worse. I mean, the turnovers, the shot selection, the inability to get back in transition. To me, it was horrible. I mean, it was the kind of game where sitting there, I can understand. Like it kind of like if I were a fan, I would and not a working member of the media, I would want to scream up and be like, I would want to stand up and scream and be like, WTF, like what is going on here? It brought there was a visceral incompetence to the way that the Warriors were playing. And a lot of it was Kuminga and Moody, to be honest. I mean, I still can't get over the three threes that Moody took that were all short. Like what? and and then he doesn't get back on defense, and he gets beat over the top. He shoots a three, misses it short, and then gets beat by Miles Turner back the other way. That was. But yeah, Halliburton picking people's pockets, and it was just. Again, he's a great player, but it was just startling, and it was another team that found a gear, and that's the thing. Those teams, it's not just Denver and the Clippers and Boston. Like, it's not just those teams who have all in their own ways found gears against the Warriors. Boston in the game in Boston a couple of weeks ago. It's not just those teams. It's Indiana and the Knicks, and and that's where it just gets.
And then there's other teams that match up terribly for the Warriors, like Minnesota and Cleveland. They've really done poorly against this year. So it's a lot of different builds of teams that have found ways to take advantage of the Warriors. It's not just an Indiana type of team that pushes the pace and has high power offense. There's a lot of different builds that have caused them problems this year.
For sure. And I think, that becomes another thing as we start to look at all of the difficult conversations. And that's kind of been the theme of the show here. Just Dubs with JD and Greg Silver here on a Saturday. KNBR, the sports leader. YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, X stream. Going to be rolling here for about another 40 minutes or so as we get you into your Saturday. And we're going to be back tomorrow as well. Dubs OT. Following the Warriors and the Timberwolves. Look for us about 6:15, 6:30. Again, we'll be on. That
will be YouTube, correct?
Yeah, we're going to be YouTube, Twitch, and the Twitter stream for that one as well. We'll make sure we get the links out to you. With the Giants picking up, we've got. It's going to be a little more sporadic. It's going to be a little more. Some are radio, also some are not. The next couple are not because of a couple of Giants conflicts. But we still have a bunch that are going to be on the radio between now and the end of the regular season. And every opportunity we can, we will be. But you can always catch this show right here on this channel. We're on immediately following every game. So for those of you that are
we'll get you to be able to call in online.
Yeah, that's coming. No, that is still coming. Again, we're thinking of the right time to break that out. But the tech is in place. We might break that out Tuesday. That I'm thinking Tuesday might be the night to break that out following the Warriors and the Heat. And again, this show's available in podcast form and all that. Appreciate Andis, appreciate AJ Lundgaard, appreciate James M chiming in. James M saying, hey, you guys should check out some of the free agents. We were kicking that around a little bit in our little pre-show text thread. The problem that the Warriors have, though, is they're not really going to have cap space unless they do a major, and I mean a major clear out. Like it's not like, so, you start talking about major free agents, that's not really going to be a path that they can go down. But, we'll have to see, right? As to, do the Warriors ultimately do something dramatic? I mean, I'm looking at, top free agents, right? And who are the top free agents? Paul George, if he opts out,
who
right?
You can trade Moody for.
LeBron, depending upon what he does. Siakam is not Siakam. He didn't sign with Indiana. OG Anunoby, right? OG Anunoby, somebody that
I feel like the Knicks make that trade with the intent to re-sign.
Totally. No, and look, he's been banged up. James Harden. Any interest in James Harden?
No.
I'm kidding.
By the way, how funny was that clip of Harden passing it to Kawhi and then closing out?
Oh my God. Yeah, how bored are those guys? What the heck was that? That was crazy. DeMar DeRozan. I mean, that'd be great, but good luck. I mean, how you getting DeMar DeRozan, who's making $28 million this year? Tobias Harris. Any interest in Tobias Harris? Of course, there's interest in Tobias Harris, but I mean, again, a lot of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, realistic interest.
Yeah, a lot of these guys you can't get. I mean, you can't get. I mean, Malik Monk, you can't get Malik Monk, right? I mean, Malik Monk would be great, but can you even get him? He's making about $10 million a year and going to obviously get more than that somewhere. Maybe he ends up staying with his buddy De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento. But, I mean, we're talking about the Warriors trying to get under the tax apron or out of the luxury tax completely, potentially. And so they're not going to, they're not going to be able to just, one, they're not going to be under the cap unless they do dramatic things. But two, they're not, they're still wanting to avoid the tax. So, even if you could get guys to come and take a discount, it's just free agency's not the jam for this team this season. It's going to have to be trade, I think. Andis Brown. Yeah, you put up Andis. Will Clay get more per year than Kerr? I think Kerr's making $17.5 million a year. I'm going to say yes, but we'll see on that. I'm going to say yes, but we'll see. I know the reported offer that we seemingly talk about every week was $2 and $48 for Clay. I still think it's going to be more in that range, assuming Clay would accept it. But Clay's going to look at the market, and I think the market is going to dictate ultimately what the Warriors would pay. But I would say yes. If Kerr's at set, I would take the over on 17.5. What about you?
Yeah. In today's market, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's still going to be over 20 million in terms of.
And with the fact that he's turned it around the way he has in the last month, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think, and the bench role, right? Like, he looks like a productive bench player. I mean, what's Malik Monk going to get? Malik Monk's probably going to be the sixth man of the year. And, he's making $9 million. I mean, Malik Monk's probably going to be a $17, $18 million player, right? I mean, yeah. I would think. And so, so maybe, but again, Malik Monk also hasn't done ish compared to Klay Thompson in his career too. And so you are paying a little bit of a Klay Thompson tax for everything that he's brought to the table. It's not going to be, a 4-year, $160 million max, but you're going to pay a little bit more, I think, for Klay in terms of everything that he's brought. Let's see.
I keep seeing some Miles Bridges comments. I gotta shut that down right now. That's a no.
Yeah,
I saw some of the top two. It's in the same way that like the Giants fans are like, oh, they should go get Trevor Bauer. It's like
I skipped over. Yeah, Miles Bridges was on the list that I was looking at, and I just didn't even mention him. Erwin Kwong from earlier in the chat. Is it me, or did Curry and Dre look tired? Their body language wasn't the normally engaged type. I do think that fatigue is hitting in. And I think that was always going to be a problem with all of the games coming in such short order. That ain't going away. Goo goo gaga. The way the season is ending is brutal AF traveling wise. Yeah. All of that is what, like, that's going to make it hard now that they're so close to Houston to, I think, stave off Houston, believe it or not, and we were kind of going back and forth. The Rockets play at home against Utah and Portland the next two. The Warriors are at Minnesota, at Miami, at Orlando the next three. At Orlando is a back-to-back and the 3rd and 4. And it's also a back-to-back at the end of this stretch where they've just been playing every other day and are going to continue to play every other day. Like, finding the energy tomorrow in Minnesota is going to be tough. Finding the energy, and again, Miami and Minnesota beat the S out of you, like, physically to play. So it's like, it's not like and then you're playing this young, athletic, long Orlando team that's got all this height everywhere. I mean, the Warriors are in a little danger zone right now. I don't think there's much doubt
a big
about it.
danger zone.
Regardless of whether or not they've played well of late and play better on the road and all, like, they're in a major danger zone. And I guess that's the other thing. Like, what can change your opinion of what the Warriors have to do based on this last month? Because it had been really, up until this homestand, trending in that direction of, well, when they've had Steph, it's whatever it's been, 16-5 or whatever it had been. But now they lose the 2 of 3 at home. Some of that momentum is gone. This thing has the potential to get worse over the next 3 games. They're as close to the Rockets as they are to being out as they are to basically being the Lakers and being 9. 8's off the table now. Like, is there a point that the Warriors could get to over the next month where it basically wipes out any of the belief that you had action from this stretch where they had played so well since the end of January?
I'd say, yeah, not making the play-in is absolutely that point.
And then what do you do?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Fire everybody. I'm kidding.
I think not making the play-in, I think losing the first game of a play-in absolutely changed the perception of that nice stretch you found. And I think probably winning a play-in game and then losing an elimination game for a playoff series probably gets you there too.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, it's all the same result in the end.
It is all the same result in the end. There's no question.
Let me ask you this, by the way. 10 seed or a 9 seed, win 2 games, get into a playoff series, get swept. Does that change it?
I mean, I think it might change it a little bit. I think it might change it a little bit. It depends. Who do you get swept by? Is it Denver or is it Minnesota, OKC? If it's Denver, it's like, okay, whatever. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the truth. VRock 408. I'm sorry, but Wiggins and Clay need to move on next year. All right. How do you get better? You trade Wiggins and Clay. You let Clay walk and you trade Wiggins for another player like Wiggins. How are you better? I mean, you're in a rebuild then. Like, you're in a rebuild with Steph. Here's the thing, Greg. Like, and I apologize because this might be a little redundant for you, but if you're telling me your lineup next year is Steph, Pajemski, Moody, let's just say, Kuminga
as your starting 3.
Well, if Wiggins is gone, who's going to be your starting 3?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, I'm just laying it out there.
Kuminga, Draymond, and then you've got like TJD as your backup center, fine. And you've got no Clay, no Chris Paul. I mean, even if you keep Wiggins and Moody's your back, like that team ain't going to be top 10. Like
30 games, maybe.
The team that they have right now without Clay off the bench and without Chris Paul off the bench and potentially without, like, how do you get back? You don't have a first round pick, by the way. The Warriors' first round pick is going to Portland through the Grizzlies. This was the Iguodala had to get out of the hard cap or under the hard cap after they did the sign and trade with Durant and D'Angelo Russell to bring D'Angelo Russell back. It made the Warriors hard capped because he was a free agent that the Warriors had signed when they did a sign and trade, basically being over the cap or over the tax. So they became a hard cap team. It meant they had to get rid of salary, which meant Iguodala had to go. So they attached a first round pick to Iguodala. They sent him to Memphis, and Memphis has since put that pick over to Portland in another deal. So that pick, I think there was some protection on it, but it was pretty high. I can't remember exactly what it was, but that was the old Kevin Durant turned into D'Lo, turned into Wiggins and Kuminga. So the price of, you basically ended up, to make all of that happen, you traded, for D'Lo, and it was basically D'Lo and that 2024 pick for Wiggins and Kuminga, which I think is still a trade. I mean, Kuminga is your number one bright spot and or asset as far as building toward the future. And then you've got Wiggins who helped you win a championship. So, I mean, again, that deal was a rousing success. So I don't think anybody can, and yeah, you had to give up your 24 pick. Like nobody can go back and be like, well, we don't have our 24 pick now. Like fail, Bob Myers screwed us. Like, no, actually that was the price of doing business. V-Rock, haha, sorry, I was just frustrated. You're right. No, look, man, like you're not crazy for saying it.
Valid.
V-Rock, you're not crazy, bro. You're not. Like that's not a crazy take, but I think that's the position the Warriors are in, is like how do you get better? Our buddy James M, go get Kuzma. I think he also was the Miles Bridges person, but go get Kuzma. Kuzma? Anyone? I'm looking at his contract stuff right now.
At this point, it's just like, don't be that team.
And what does that mean?
That was his tweet when the Pistons had a lead on the Celtics during their losing streak.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
right.
So
that's right.
Just a little bit of a niche riff on Kyle Kuzma.
So Kuzma is on a deal. Kuzma is on a deal that's going down. I remember we had the Wiggins mistake. I thought Wiggins' deal originally was going down. It's not, by the way. But
you were just thinking about Kuzma all along.
But it looks like Kuzma's 25.5. He goes down to 23.5, then to 21.4, then to 19.4. But Kuzma's got 3 more years on his deal after this year. 3 more years on his deal after this year, but it does go down. 23.5, 21.4, 19.3. And he's only 28 at this point. So, but again, are they going to trade you Wiggins for, no, it would have to be Wiggins and somebody. And, they would have to send somebody back also for like financial purposes. But I don't know. What do you think? Like Wiggins for Kuzma? Does that work? Kuzma and Kuminga. I mean, Kuzma basically plays the 4 too. So like, I don't think Kuzma and Kuminga necessarily work together because I think they're both power forwards at this point.
Yeah, and I think that actually, as the words were about to come out of my mouth, Andis Brown said he only cares about offense, doesn't put any effort on defense, basketball IQ. I was just going to say, can he defend on the perimeter? What's his shot selection IQ?
He hasn't defended.
Kind of the 2 things. He
hasn't defended since the Lakers. Like he has not defended since he was on the Lakers on the bubble championship team. Like it has not. He has not defended at all. Goo Goo Gaga, Halliburton, a couple of comments on Halliburton just being a straight up stud, purest point guard in the league. Yeah, he just controlled the game last night. I love Halliburton. And he's got a little Steph to him. He's got a little, baby-faced assassin killer to him, which I kind of like. I mean, the two threes that he hit at the end of the quarters was very Steph-esque. Right? Like you're going to make a couple mistakes and I'm just going to drive you, I'm just going to drive it right into you, for your mistakes. Halliburton is awesome. And so, yeah, tough stuff when you look at where the Warriors are at, and some difficult conversations that are going to have to be had, depending upon how things end. And how things end is important. I mean, they convinced themselves to keep going last year with the vets. And if anything, maybe get a little bit older. They cannot do that this year, Greg. That did not work. That failed. And the young players have much more legitimately contributed this year than they did last year. So I get wanting to continue the development, especially with Kuminga and all of that. You want to get to Irwin's comment?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton to say on it about the possible topic. Do you think there's more to the story, that Draymond's back's bothering him more than he's leading on? I think fatigue, kind of like we touched on earlier in the show, is a real factor. I don't think Draymond Green's been as effective the last couple of games, and I would probably attribute that to fatigue more than the back problems. I still think he's defending fine. I think if his back's really wrong, he's not going to play, or it'll be pretty easy to see because of the lack of margin for error that this team has, but that's just my take on it.
Yeah, I think he is probably hurting a little more than he's letting on, but I think he knows that he's got to be out there for them to win. And so I think he's trying to play through it and pick his spots. I think it is going to be interesting to see. I know we talked earlier about the fact that the Warriors really can't afford to take any games off or rest. I think they're, as much as they can't afford it, I kind of feel like they're going to do it. And they're going to have to pick a spot to do it. I don't know where exactly they pick the spot to do it, but I think at some point you don't want to risk, big time injury. At some point, I think they are going to just say enough, and I don't think it's going to be wholesale, like everybody gets a night off, but I do think there might be a couple of nights here and there where Draymond gets this night off. Steph's not going to want to, but I just don't, looking at them over the last week, it's already taking a toll on them physically. And it's not like the next week is much more physically taxing than the last week has been. Like, it just, like, that's just reality. Like, you had 3 games at home and a game in LA. I mean, the next, again, I not to belabor it, but Minnesota is a grinder of a team. Miami is freaking Miami. They are they are going to grind you down. Then you get the young athletic Magic. You get a break in Charlotte, but for that to be the 4th game of the trip, and then you get a little break in San Jose, like it's tough because you run the potential on this trip of basically getting your ass kicked in the first 3 physically. You might win 1 or 2. I'm not saying you can't win, but you're going to get your ass kicked physically over the first 3 games of the trip. And then it's going to be, all right, go win the last 2, because the last 2 are must wins, Charlotte and San Antonio. And we've seen that San Antonio can hang with and or beat the Warriors. So it's just no picnic. And then you come home and play Dallas, who's really good, before you go right back halfway across the country to play Houston, which might be now all of a sudden the biggest game the Warriors have on their schedule. And then you go play Dallas again, second of a back-to-back, 3-4. And that's going to be the 4th, 4 and 6. So it's 3-4, 4 and 6. There's a bunch of 4 and 6s coming up. They just had a 4 and 7. They're going to have a 4 and 6 coming up this Sunday. They're going to have a 4 and 6 coming up the next week. Like, they're going to have a 4 and 6 the next. Like, they've got 4 and 6s each of the last 3 weeks of the year. When you look at it, they go Sunday to Friday each of the next 3 weeks this week, between now and the end of the year, and then have a 12:30 on April 14th as the extra game. So you got 3 4 and 6s for the next 12, and then the 13th game is a 12:30 game on the final day of the season. So, like, it is
on the road.
It is no pick. No, that one's at home. That one's at home.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah. The 2 Utah games are the consecutive Utah Sundays are both at home. Because as I always say about the NBA schedule, Greg, they take all the games that the networks want, and then they get to March and they just cram in whatever's left. They just cram it. They get to right about March 10th, and they just cram in every game that they like. Oh, Utah hasn't gone to the Warriors yet. All right, we'll put those 2 at the end of the year. Like, it literally, like, if you look at any team schedule, it looks that way. It looks like the outlaw, just the random. Oh, they haven't gone on this Eastern trip yet. Send them. Let's send them out there. So yeah, it makes it tough. And then the Warriors had, with the tragic passing of Coach Decky, they had a couple of games get flip flopped and meshed around in that they're trying to be able to make up, which created another back-to-back and another back and forth, which, whatever, can't complain about that, but it is part of the deal here.
Yes, it is. Just kind of reading through some more comments and everything. Holy Lessons is back, says, wow, you guys are still on.
Hell yeah, we're
10
still on.
to noon every Saturday. Book it. We won't miss it.
Yeah, we do it. And on these YouTube shows, it's, commercial free. We basically take 1, 2, 3 minute break. My coffee spill turned it into like a 5 or a 6 minute break. But yeah, we basically take one little break at some point and just keep rolling. We like talking to the people and we like being interactive. That's what Just Dubs is all about. That's what Dubs OT is all about. Join us for Dubs OT on KNBR. The YouTube stream, the Twitter X stream, the Twitch stream. Like, we're doing big things in terms of our Warriors coverage. We're going to be wherever the Warriors are in the play-in tournament. If they're there, if they're in LA, I'm going to be there. If they're in Dallas, I'm going to be there. If they're in Phoenix, I'm going to be there. If they're in Sacramento, I'm going to be there. If they end up making it to Denver or Minnesota or OKC, wherever they go, I'm going to be there. And we're going to have some big time Dubs coverage between now and whenever this thing ends. Would be fun if it ended up at least getting to the back part of April, although that's looking like it's going to be much more of a difficult task for the Warriors here when you look at what's coming up. Joe H., the future doesn't sound very promising for an aging team with very little trade value. Your thoughts?
Spot on. I mean, can't crystallize it better than that.
I mean, they are in a tough spot. Like, they are in a how do you get better spot. And it's, you've got older players that you are considering bringing back as price of admission guys. And then you've got younger players who you like that you want to continue to develop. And then you also have the conundrum of how do you improve? And so I think that's difficult. We were talking about the key offseason questions and conversations, more so that the Warriors are going to have. They're going to have the conversation with Steph about just where his head's at as far as the potential to not be title contenders for the next couple of years. They're going to have the Kuminga conversation, because I've said and will continue to say there are two ways the Warriors can be title contenders next year. It's one, if Jonathan Kuminga becomes a superstar, and two, if they trade Jonathan Kuminga for a superstar. Like that's it. It all centers around him. If you keep him, I understand it. If he's not a superstar next year, you're not a title contender. So that's fine. You continue his development and you see where it leads for the following couple of years. If he's not the number 2, or you don't think you can be a title contender with him as the number 2 next year, then the question becomes, if you want to be that, how do you bring that number 2 in? And Kuminga is the only guy with that value. And then they have to have Wiggins and Klay Thompson conversations. The Wiggins conversation, Greg, being, can we continue to do this? And also, can we trade him? Because literally, will anybody take him? Because the Warriors cannot attach anything to Wiggins to get rid of him. You cannot attach a pick to Wiggins to offload him unless you're getting a player back in return that you think can help you. And then Klay Thompson, the tough conversation with Klay, which is basically, how little are you willing to take, Klay?
Yeah, and I actually really like this regulator comment, because I kind of remembered a thought I had earlier in the show that slipped my brain. And that was, it's a fair thing to say. This is how it looks when a dynasty dies down. Hanging on, coming back to the mean, aging new stars, new teams dominating, just got to deal with it. Number one, dynasties don't end elegantly in just about anything. Number two, the issue with the Warriors and the decline isn't, Steph's getting older, or like Draymond got suspended. Yeah, that didn't help. But the root is the collapse of the 20-year-olds, the 20-somethings. Andrew Wiggins, kind of reverting back to the player he was in Minnesota that was underwhelming for a number 1 pick. Jordan Poole really not working out and kind of becoming a mess. Looney's still in his 20s, which wouldn't always be able to tell by his play style.
No.
He hasn't been as effective. James Wiseman didn't work out. Like, the core and the statue players the ones who will get statues outside of Chase Center, they were always going to get older. That was going to happen. But it was about finding ways to keep it going and bridging it. And in 2022, it looked like Wiggins was kind of going to be that key bridge point. I see Erwin in the chat asking about Chris Middleton. Again, older player that's had injury issues. I don't know what that really gets you in the long run unless you go and get a second star and you're like, let's just get a veteran that could score.
Yeah, I would like, I mean, you would like to have Middleton, but he's hardly available. He's also got a player option. So he's 31 million next year in his 33 year. So he's going to be 33, I think in the summer, but before next year, he's going to be 33 next season. So Middleton next year, 33, $31 million. And then the following year, he has a player option for 33.2. So he goes from 31 to 33.2 in terms of money in his 34 year. And yeah, he just doesn't play enough, unfortunately, anymore. So I think that's one that you'd stay away from. But that's one where you'd also ask the question, and I think we know the answer to this, but we can ask the question. I think the answer is no, but would the Bucks take Wiggins for Middleton? Like that? And again, Wiggins has got an extra year on the deal. So I think the answer there is no, even though Wiggins is younger, but would they? So, I mean, I don't think that, and again, that would also be, I think the Warriors would probably have to add something to that deal, but then you're getting a player back that it just may not be available to play. And I just don't think the Warriors can afford that, even for Wiggins, who throughout stretches has not been available to play himself. But I'm looking at this year. I mean, he's played 45 games this year. He played 33 games last year, 66 games the year before, 68 of 72. So yeah, but these last couple of years, it's been problematic, obviously, for Chris Middleton. But yeah, you would they take Wiggins? Would you have to add something to the deal to get them to take Wiggins? And then do you trust that for the next 2 years, with Rick Celebrini and all of that you could get a good 2 years out of, because he is a 2-year window player. Like, that is one thing. Like, if you're focused on and he's also somebody that I don't think you'd have to give up Kuminga to get, like, at this point. So I mean, I say that maybe you would have to give up Kuminga to get him if you're the Bucks, but and they ask for him. But I obviously would not consider doing that. I would not put Kuminga in that kind of deal.
Yeah, and just to put Erwin's comment back up about Wiggins, I mean, he's been like I think it's pretty clear where we both stand on Wiggins, and respecting the fact that he's going through things personally. But the truth is, he has kept his matters private, which is totally his choice and totally fair. So if you're us, all we can really do is just assess it from the basketball standpoint. And I don't know exactly what he has been dealing with or going through, but it is a conversation that the Warriors have to have, because the reality is that as unfortunate as it may be, and as much as they should and we should care about Andrew Wiggins, the human being, his product on the basketball court has been rather inconsistent and kind of detrimental to the Warriors when he's not showing up. So I think it's just a conversation that needs to be had. It's not an indictment on Wiggins as a human or what he's going through, but it's an honest conversation that they got to have. That's just the nature of the situation. It's unfortunate, and I do have very much empathy for what he may be going through. But the fact of the matter is, he has completely fallen off from the player he was 2 years ago, justified or not.
Well, and look, you support him publicly, as the Warriors have. You support him publicly, and you don't let any of what's going on seep in. But privately, you do have to ask yourself, and again, only they know, because only they know truly what is going on and how much it's impacted him and all of that. And maybe we get some light shed on it at some point. Maybe we don't. But the one thing that the Warriors are going to have to do, this is all part of that conversation, is kind of my point that they're going to have, which is, it's the simple fact of you can support him publicly, but behind closed doors, you have to ask yourself, can we do this again? Is this going to happen? Is the play being impacted by the personal issue? Maybe. Is the personal issue going to be dealt with to where we can get better play next year? Is he going to be available next year or have to take time away? All of those things, I think internally, not publicly, but internally, are conversations that are fair to have with the player as you ultimately determine how you want to map out your team for the following year. So I think that's all fair game, while publicly basically saying, hey, it's none of everybody's business. The media, the fans don't get to, decide whether it's an excused absence or not, or whether the personal issue is severe enough.
Too much PTO.
Like that. Yeah, I'm out on all of that. But internally, again, the organization has to talk to the player and decide whether or not they can afford, because I'll be honest, I don't think the Warriors can afford to have next year be the last 2 years, this year and last year. If they believe that it's going to be more of that, then maybe you do have to look to move on. But again, moving on is not addition by subtraction. Benjamin, I'm not comfortable with the thought of trading Kuminga. I'd rather concede to the reality of not being a championship team and start focusing on rebuilding in the not too distant future. I think that is a really well-reasoned take. I don't think you really, Joe Lacob said he doesn't want to bottom out, but you still have Steph. So I think that's, you still have Steph, and that gets to the, if Steph is cool with that, hey, we're going to be mid for the next couple years, and I'm still going to be great, and Kuminga's going to develop, and we're not going to be title contenders, and let's see how good we can be around those two, and Draymond, maybe Clay, then you roll with it if that's the case. And so, we'll see, beyond that. But yeah, I think that's a reasoned take. And I think that's like Ben's take that's up on the screen right now. I think that's how Warrior fans have to look at it. If you're not open to trading Kuminga, then you have to acknowledge the fact that it's not going to be a championship team in all likelihood next year for sure. And then probably really for the next 2 years, or probably really period for the rest of the Steph era, actually. Again, unless Kuminga becomes a freaking superstar, unless he actually does become Kawhi or Giannis or any of those players that he sometimes unrealistically is compared to, at least at this stage when he's still 21 years old. Final couple of minutes here, Greg. Anything else we didn't get to as far as some of the comments? It is fun. That's one thing when we don't have the calls, we can really dive into the comments and the questions and those things. And so, yeah, we appreciate it. I know you put up Benjamin, the extension of the comment, the other comment, ready to start rebuilding in the near future, like what OKC did. Yeah, I don't think Joe Lacob wants to do what OKC did. And they actually sneaky didn't do it for as long as people think. It felt like they did it for half a decade, but it really was only like 21, 22. It was really
Gilgeous-Alexander got really, really good.
It was really only like 2-3 years of that. And now, because they were even in the year that got ended by COVID, that was the Chris Paul year, right? Like that was they were still a good team that year. But obviously they had moved on from Paul George, but they were still they were in the bubble and all that, that year. So it really has only been the last, even last year they were in the play-in tournament. So, that it was really a 2+ year, 2 to 3 year rebuild. Let's call it a 3-year rebuild. Yeah. Because they didn't make the playoffs last year. So it was 3 years. So are you, and look, some Warrior fans are there. Are you willing to be awful 25, 26, 27 if it guarantees? Here's the thing. It doesn't guarantee. It guarantees you're going to be great in 28. Sure. But you still have Steph. So, and they're not getting rid of Steph. So that's that. Some final thoughts, Greg.
Honestly, the only final thought I really have, just because it has come up in 4 different streams, I think, at this point, which I just find hilarious. It just it's a riff that keeps getting recycled. And today it's Erwin that brought it back up. Everyone wants a Papa versus Silver duo pickup game, which I do think is, I mean, I'm all for it, by the way. Silvers and 5.
So Derek and Greg against
No. Derek and oh yeah, that Greg.
Yeah, Derek and Greg against Greg and Mike. There's 2 Gregs. We have an older Greg and a younger Greg.
Yeah.
What if it's
spread? It's a -5.5 for the Papas.
What if it's just Gregs versus everybody? What if you split it up and it's just the 2 Gregs?
Oh, I wonder how our on-court chemistry would be.
Greg versus
that's a good idea.
I mean, there's different. It could be a Greg off.
A Greg off
at that point. So yeah, we'll figure that out. CA JD, which way? Greg Silver, which way do you 2 lean? Keep the core or blow it up? I would keep the core. I would keep the core. I would keep the core, and people are going to come down my road for this, but I would keep the core and I would explore the Kuminga trade. And again, I'm not rushing into it. Kuminga's played at a level where you can't rush into it. I've already said, hey, they're better off for not making an Anunoby or a Siakam deal, which, 2 months ago, I think you could have made a case that the Warriors, that would have been acceptable. Not the way that Kuminga's played over the last 2 months, but I think they have to look at, can they get a superstar? Can they get a superstar player for Kuminga? But that all has to work in conjunction with the Clay problem, the Wiggins problem. What does Steph think? And the fact, and you mentioned this earlier, Greg, the fact that you really are, if you do that, you are going to be in a really bad spot in all likelihood in like 2027. Like almost. Yeah. And you have to realistically believe you contend. Like you cannot trade Jonathan Kuminga and then next year you're playing to stay out of the play-in. Like if you trade Jonathan Kuminga, because that's the flip side to it. I said the other side to it. If you keep Kuminga, you have to accept the fact that you might not be a title contender. Fine. Understood if that's the route you want to go. The flip side to that is if you trade Kuminga, you better be freaking top 4 in the West. Like otherwise you can't do it. And so that's the calculus that the Warriors are going to have to figure out here in the offseason, in addition to all these other difficult questions.
Yeah, it is. I'm glad you laid out both sides, because I think if you trade Kuminga and you're not in the serious upper echelon of teams, that's a fail. Problem.
That's a fail.
Big fail. Big fail.
That's a fail. Yep. You can't trade Kuminga and then, we're got to go 10-5 to be the 8. Like,
no.
Like that's an epic fail. All right. Great stuff, Greg. Really appreciate it, my man. We'll do it again tomorrow. Join us for Dubs OT, 6:15 to 6:30, following the Warriors and the Timberwolves. We'll continue this conversation next week, back on the radio from 10 a.m. until noon with just Dubs, but also always YouTube, Twitch, and the Twitter X stream.
Hey, by the way, Gut Thinker, you're always a ray of sunshine in the chat. You know you can turn on the radio, right? Like, we're getting kicked off to go on YouTube to talk basketball. If you want to talk baseball, we got it all weekend on the radio, and we got 6 months. So miss me with all that.
Exactly.
Get out of here.
Exactly. Marty, you can get Marty on the radio. You can get Walter on the radio. You get all that stuff on the radio. So enjoy it. For Greg, I'm JD. We'll talk to you tomorrow. KNBR, the sports leader.